Foxes tend to appear when life is trying to redirect you before the redirection becomes disruptive. That is the first thing to understand. A fox does not usually arrive as a warning of disaster. It arrives as a signal that something in the path ahead requires more attention than you have been giving it. The message is not fear. The message is watch more carefully. This is why fox encounters often feel strange even when nothing dramatic happens. You may see one crossing a road, appearing near a boundary, moving along the edge of trees, or slipping through a neighborhood where it almost seems out of place. The moment has a quiet sharpness to it. Something in you pauses because the fox carries intelligence in motion. It does not simply appear, it reveals that movement itself has become meaningful. Most people think of foxes as tricksters, and that view is partly useful, but it can become too shallow if it only means deception. The deeper teaching is that fox energy reveals where perception has become too direct, too literal, or too easily satisfied. A fox does not always mean someone is lying to you. Sometimes it means you are looking at a situation in a way that misses the side entrance, the hidden motive, the indirect consequence, or the more intelligent path around an obstacle. This matters because misalignment rarely begins as obvious failure. It often begins as a small feeling that something is off, followed by the mind explaining that feeling away. You tell yourself the situation makes sense. You tell yourself the timing is fine. You tell yourself the person probably meant nothing by it. The fox appears in that space between instinct and explanation, reminding you that the first strange feeling may deserve more respect than the polished story that follows it. You may notice that fox sightings often happen around decisions, not necessarily major ones, but decisions that quietly set a direction. A route you take, a conversation you avoid, an agreement you make, a person you keep giving the benefit of the doubt. The fox does not tell you which choice to make. It sharpens your awareness of the pattern surrounding the choice. It asks you to notice not only what is happening, but what the situation is teaching you to ignore. That is one mechanism behind fox encounters. They pull attention toward the overlooked detail. They move through edges, between spaces and transitional zones because those are the places where clarity often hides. A fox crossing your path can reflect a crossing point in your own life, a moment where one direction continues the familiar pattern and another direction requires more cunning, more discernment, or more honest observation. The fox does not force the shift. It makes the need for a shift harder to dismiss. There is also a difference between intelligence and cleverness that fox energy begins to reveal. Cleverness can help you escape discomfort temporarily. Intelligence helps you recognize the pattern that keeps producing the discomfort. Many people become clever with their own avoidance. They know how to explain why they stayed, why they delayed, why they ignored the sign, why they kept walking into the same lesson under a different name. The fox appears when cleverness must become wisdom or it will keep serving the old loop. This is where the trickster quality becomes more precise. The trick is not always outside you. Sometimes the trick is the way your own mind keeps finding beautiful reasons to remain misaligned. You can be very intelligent and still deceive yourself with elegant explanations. You can understand spiritual language, emotional language, practical language, and still use all of it to avoid a simple truth. Fox energy enters to reveal that self deception often sounds reasonable from the inside. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it is also useful. It moves the teaching away from suspicion and toward discernment. If you assume every fox means someone else is deceiving you, you may become paranoid. If you assume every fox means nothing, you may stay blind. The wiser response is to ask where perception needs refinement. What detail have you minimized? What pattern are you calling coincidence because naming it will require movement? Foxes also show up when redirection needs to happen without collapse. Some changes arrive through sudden endings, but Fox energy prefers a quieter route. It teaches you to adjust before the wall appears. It shows you how to leave a path by noticing the bend early, rather than waiting for life to make the wrong direction undeniable. In this way, foxes are less about panic and more about timing. They ask whether you can respond to a subtle signal before it becomes a harsh consequence. You may experience this as a small inner nudge after seeing one. A conversation feels different. A plan feels less solid. A person's words no longer sit in the body the same way. The fox does not create suspicion. It often reveals that suspicion was already present but unacknowledged. The encounter brings the body back into the decision. And that matters because the body often registers misalignment before the mind is ready to admit it. There is also a protective layer in fox symbolism. It is the protection of adaptability. A fox survives by reading environments quickly, changing directions when needed, and using awareness instead of brute strength. That becomes a teaching for the listener who keeps trying to solve subtle problems with heavy effort. Not every obstacle needs confrontation. Some obstacles need a smarter path. This does not mean avoidance is always wisdom. That distinction is important. Fox energy can help you move around unnecessary conflict, but it can also reveal when you are using strategy to avoid truth. The same intelligence that protects you can also become a hiding place. This is why fox encounters require honesty. The question is not only what you need to avoid, but what you are avoiding because you do not want to face the consequence of clarity. When foxes appear repeatedly, the pattern usually asks for closer observation of motive, timing, and direction. Motive shows what is really driving the situation. Timing shows whether movement is aligned or premature. Direction shows whether the path you are on is still serving the life you are becoming. A single fox encounter may only spark curiosity. Repeated encounters often mean the same lesson is circling until you stop treating it as background. This teaching becomes practical very quickly. After seeing a fox, you may want to review what has felt subtly off in recent days. Not with fear and not with obsession, but with calm precision. Which conversation left residue? Which opportunity feels attractive but strangely complicated? Which relationship requires you to ignore too much in order to keep it simple? Fox energy becomes useful when it moves you into observation without rushing you into reaction. The deeper implication is that not every sign is meant to comfort you. Some signs refine you. They make your seeing more accurate. They teach you how to recognize misalignment before it becomes injury, how to detect self-deception before it becomes a life pattern, and how to change course without needing a dramatic collapse to justify the change. Foxes belong to that kind of teaching because they carry subtlety as intelligence. Once you understand this, the fox becomes less of a mysterious visitor and more of a mirror for how you navigate complexity. It asks whether you are awake inside the details of your own life. It asks whether your instinct is being honored or explained away. It asks whether your intelligence is serving freedom or maintaining a more polished version of avoidance. Once those questions begin working in you, the next fox encounter is no longer just something you saw. It becomes something you are ready to read more carefully. The fox becomes more meaningful once you understand that redirection does not always feel like guidance at first. Sometimes it feels like inconvenience, a delay, a strange hesitation, a plan that suddenly loses its clean feeling, a person who becomes harder to read, or a path that keeps requiring more explanation than it should. The mind tends to resist these signals because they interfere with momentum. But the fox teaches that momentum is not the same as alignment, and a life can move quickly in the wrong direction while still feeling productive. This is why fox energy often appears around situations that look workable on the surface but feel complicated underneath. You may have a plan that makes sense logically, but every step toward it produces friction. You may be dealing with someone whose words are correct, but whose timing, tone, or pattern leaves something unsettled in you. You may be moving toward an opportunity that looks attractive, while your body keeps quietly asking why it feels so crowded around the edges. The fox enters those situations because it belongs to the space between appearance and pattern. Most people are trained to trust what can be explained more than what can be sensed. That creates a problem because misalignment often becomes visible only after you have ignored the earlier felt signal. A fox does not ask you to abandon reason. It asks you to let reason include the information your body has already collected. That shift matters because discernment becomes much sharper when the mind and body are allowed to compare notes instead of competing for authority. You can notice this in the way foxes move through an environment. They do not waste energy confronting everything directly. They read openings, edges, timing, and distance. This movement becomes a teaching in itself because not every obstacle in your life requires force. Some obstacles require a change in angle. Some require silence until the pattern exposes itself. Some require you to stop walking straight into a situation just because you already decided it was the path. That is one reason fox encounters can feel like invitations to slow down without becoming passive. The fox is not telling you to freeze, it is telling you to become more precise. Precision is different from hesitation because hesitation comes from fear, while precision comes from reading the moment honestly. When fox energy is active, the next move may still be required, but it should be made with more awareness of timing, motive, and hidden consequence. This makes the teaching practical rather than merely symbolic. The idea of trickster clarity becomes deeper here. A trickster does not only deceive, a trickster reveals the limits of ordinary perception. It shows you that what you thought was straightforward may have another layer. It reminds you that the obvious path is not always the most intelligent path, and that the most comfortable explanation is not always the truest one. In this sense, the fox does not create confusion. It exposes where your certainty may have become too narrow. This can be uncomfortable because many people use certainty to feel safe. They want to decide what something means and then rest inside that decision. But fox energy does not let perception become lazy. It keeps asking what else is moving beneath the surface. What does this person gain if you believe the story they are offering? What do you avoid feeling if you accept the easiest explanation? What becomes possible if you stop assuming that the most visible route is the only route? There is a specific kind of self deception that fox encounters often reveal. It is the deception of intelligent avoidance. This happens when a person is not ignoring the truth because they are foolish, but because they are skilled at explaining why the truth does not need to be acted on yet. They understand the situation well enough to describe it beautifully, but not honestly enough to change it. The fox appears when awareness has become more polished than transformative. You may see this in relationships where you keep understanding someone instead of admitting the pattern is harming you. You may see it in work situations where you keep calling misalignment a season of adjustment. You may see it in spiritual or personal growth where you keep analyzing the lesson instead of taking the step the lesson has been pointing toward. The fox does not shame this, it simply makes the cleverness visible, because cleverness can either become liberation or a more elegant form of captivity. This is why fox energy is not only about detecting deception outside of you. That would be too easy and too incomplete. The more useful teaching is learning how your own mind participates in keeping misalignment alive. You may avoid clarity by making everything more complex than it needs to be. You may avoid action by gathering more signs, more interpretations, more reassurance, more reasons to wait. The fox teaches that discernment is not the same as endless analysis. At some point, seeing must become movement. Still, movement under fox energy should not be reckless. It should be adaptive. Adaptability is one of the central teachings here because life does not always reward the most forceful person. Sometimes it rewards the one who can read the room, change direction without drama, and preserve energy for the move that actually matters. The fox survives not by dominating the field, but by understanding it. That changes how you respond to pressure. Instead of asking how to overpower a situation, you begin asking what the situation is revealing about the wiser route. This perspective can help when you are dealing with conflict. Some conflicts need direct confrontation. but others become worse when approached too bluntly or too soon. Fox energy teaches you to recognize the difference. If directness would only feed the distortion, timing may matter more than volume. If someone is not honest enough to receive a clear statement, you may need to adjust your access rather than keep explaining yourself. The fox reminds you that a boundary does not always need an argument to become real. That lesson has real implications for emotional maturity. Many people confuse honesty with saying everything immediately. Others confuse peace with saying nothing at all. Fox energy shows a middle path where observation becomes the first form of action. You watch the pattern long enough to know what kind of response is required. You do not suppress your truth, but you also do not throw it into a field that has already shown you it will distort the message. This is not avoidance, it is disciplined timing. Repeated Fox encounters often come when life is asking you to stop mistaking complexity for depth. Some situations are not deep, they are tangled. Some people are not mysterious, they are inconsistent. Some paths are not challenging because they are meaningful, but because they are misaligned. The fox helps separate meaningful difficulty from unnecessary complication. That distinction can save a person years of spiritualizing what was simply not right. This becomes especially important in seasons where you are growing more perceptive. Increased awareness can make you notice more layers, but it can also tempt you to make excuses for every layer you notice. You may see someone's wound and forget to see their behavior. You may understand the reason behind a pattern and treat that reason as permission for the pattern to continue. Fox energy brings perception back into balance. It says seeing more should make you clearer, not more easily trapped. Fox also teaches that redirection can be quiet because it respects your agency. Life does not always slam the door because slamming the door removes your participation from the lesson. Sometimes the signal comes softly enough that you still have to choose. A strange encounter, a repeated animal, a subtle feeling, a pattern that keeps returning. These signals ask whether you will listen before consequence has to become louder. Once you understand this, a fox sighting becomes less about asking what will happen and more about asking what has already been shown. The answer may not be dramatic. It may be as simple as this path needs more attention. This agreement needs more discernment. This person's pattern needs to be believed. This opportunity needs to be evaluated by how it feels in motion, not only by how it looks from a distance. The fox brings the lesson down into real decisions, and that is where its teaching keeps expanding. Foxes do not remove uncertainty from your life. They train you to move through uncertainty with sharper perception. They show you how to honor instinct without becoming paranoid, how to adapt without becoming evasive, how to recognize misalignment without needing a disaster to validate your concern. Once that way of seeing begins to develop, the fox becomes more than a sign of redirection. It becomes a reminder that intelligence is not only what you know, but how honestly you respond to what you have already noticed. At the deepest level, foxes teach the difference between suspicion and discernment. Suspicion looks for threat because it does not feel safe. Discernment looks for pattern because it wants to move clearly. The two can feel similar in the body at first, especially if you have been hurt before or trained to doubt your own perception. But fox energy does not ask you to become guarded against life. It asks you to become more honest about what life has already shown you. This difference matters because suspicion can make every detail feel dangerous, while discernment makes the right detail useful. A fox does not panic when it notices movement in the field. It studies the movement. It waits long enough to understand whether the signal requires retreat, patience, or a different path. That is the practical lesson. Not every uncomfortable feeling is a warning, but every repeated discomfort deserves attention. You may notice fox energy around people or situations that require you to read between what is said and what is consistently done. Words can create comfort very quickly. Patterns create truth more slowly but more reliably. The fox teaches you to stop accepting explanations that do not match behavior. When a person's language is clean but their pattern leaves you confused, the confusion itself becomes information. This is one of the most important ways foxes help you identify misalignment. Misalignment often survives because it keeps offering enough reason to stay. There is always a justification, a good intention, a difficult season, a misunderstood motive, or a future promise that makes the pattern easier to excuse. The fox does not tell you to become cold. It tells you to notice how much evidence you are required to ignore in order to keep calling something aligned. Once that becomes visible, redirection begins to feel less like loss. You start to understand that being moved away from something is not always punishment or failure. Sometimes redirection is protection arriving in a form your pride does not immediately appreciate. A delay can keep you from entering a field too early. A closed door can prevent you from building a life around a version of desire that was not fully honest yet. A strange hesitation can save you from a path that only looked clear because you had not examined it closely. The fox also teaches that not every opportunity deserves your full presence. This is hard for people who have learned to prove themselves by committing quickly, working harder, or making things work no matter what. Fox energy asks a different question. Does this path become cleaner as you move toward it, or does it require more and more internal negotiation? If something becomes increasingly complicated the closer you get to it, that complication may be revealing the true shape of the path. This does not mean every difficult path is wrong. Some meaningful directions require effort, courage, and adjustment. The fox helps you separate meaningful effort from distorted effort. Meaningful effort strengthens your clarity even when the work is hard. Distorted effort drains your clarity and makes you dependent on explanations to keep going. That distinction is subtle at first, but once you see it, you begin recognizing where your life has been asking for wisdom instead of endurance. Foxes often appear when you are being invited to trust a quieter kind of intelligence. Not dramatic intuition, not emotional certainty, not a loud inner voice, but a precise noticing that keeps returning. It may show up as a repeated sense that a situation feels slightly wrong, or that a person's timing feels inconsistent, or that a plan has too many hidden costs. The mind may dismiss these as small. The fox teaches that small signals are often the earliest language of large consequences. This is why fox encounters can feel playful and serious at the same time. There is a lightness to fox energy, but it is not careless. It carries the intelligence of someone who knows that heaviness is not always the best response to complexity. Sometimes you need to loosen your grip enough to see the alternate path. Sometimes the answer does not arrive through more pressure, but through a shift in angle. The fox reminds you that intelligence can be agile without becoming evasive. That agility becomes especially important when you are dealing with systems, habits, or relationships that do not respond well to direct force. Some situations become more distorted when confronted too early. Some people use your directness as fuel for more confusion. Some environments punish clarity before they are ready to respect it. Fox energy teaches you to recognize when directness is wisdom and when timing is the deeper form of clarity. This is not permission to avoid difficult conversations. It is instruction to stop confusing reaction with truth. There are times when the cleanest thing you can do is speak plainly. There are also times when the cleanest thing you can do is gather your energy, reduce access, and let the pattern reveal itself without your constant explanation. The fox teaches that a boundary does not become real because you argued for it. It becomes real when your movement changes. That idea can alter the way you understand action. Many people think action has to be visible, dramatic, or announced, but fox action is often quiet. Choosing not to respond immediately, taking a different route, waiting before agreeing, asking one more question, noticing what someone does when you stop over functioning. These are small movements, but they can change an entire field because they interrupt the automatic pattern. When foxes appear repeatedly, they may be showing you where your life has become too predictable to the wrong things. Predictability is not always safety. Sometimes it is how misalignment finds you. If you always explain, certain people learn to wait for your explanation. If you always forgive without change, certain patterns learn that they can return. If you always override your hesitation, certain paths learn you will enter them even when your body has already objected. The fox invites you to become less available to your old pattern. That is a deeper redirection than simply avoiding a person or changing a decision. It means shifting the inner mechanism that keeps delivering you to the same lesson. You do not only leave the situation, you stop being the version of yourself that needed so much evidence before trusting what was already clear. That is where Fox energy becomes transformative rather than merely cautionary. You can begin practicing this by studying the moments that create inner negotiation. Negotiation is not always wrong, but constant inner negotiation is often a sign that alignment is weak. When something is right, it may still be challenging, but it usually has a clean center. When something is misaligned, the center feels crowded. You keep needing reasons, interpretations, reassurances, and future promises to quiet the part of you that already senses the distortion. The fox teaches you to respect that crowded feeling, not to fear it, not to dramatize it, but to listen to it. There is wisdom in noticing how much effort it takes to make something feel acceptable. There is wisdom in realizing that peace should not require constant mental construction. There is wisdom in admitting that a path may look possible and still not be yours to take. By the time this teaching settles, the fox is no longer just a sign of trickster energy or external misdirection. It becomes a guide into a more refined way of living, a way of moving where you do not need chaos before you adjust, betrayal before you believe the pattern, or collapse before you change direction. You learn to let subtlety be enough. You learn to let the early signal matter. And this is where the fox leaves the teaching open rather than finished. Because once you begin reading life like this, you start noticing how often guidance first arrives as something small, inconvenient, or easy to dismiss. A pause, a crossing, a glance, a complication that is not resolved cleanly. The fox simply teaches you not to waste those moments, because sometimes the smallest signal is the first doorway into a wiser path.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Haret library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.